Hi, good evening. This is Pavan Srinath, and welcome to the latest edition of the GCPP Prime Time. I'm your host for the day, and joining me is Anupam Manur, also an analyst at the Takshashila Institution. The GCPP Prime Time, I think we are in our 22nd or 23rd episode. We've sort of lost the count, but we've had quite a few episodes. And the idea here is to have alternate programming to the madness of primetime television in India, at least about once a week, where we get to indulge in a little bit of wonkery, talk about policy, talk about what's happening. And each time we pick a new topic that is relevant for the week and I think for the year as well. So, welcome, Anupam. Thanks. This week, we've had a very interesting week in policy. Yeah. Big moves in the government, certain controversies, hot announcements coming on FDI reform. So we thought, let's talk about FDI policy. Right? And I mean, have we really unclogged the FDI policy? Was FDI and foreign direct investment clogged to begin with, and so on? Let's dive right in. So, Anupam, one of my concerns has been, so we talk a lot about economic reforms in the country, right? That we need a second generation of reforms after what's happened in 91 and what's happened in little bits. But often when we're talking about reforms, we keep talking about FDI, right? Foreign direct investment. Is FDI really reform? I mean, why are we clubbing the two?
FDI is definitely a big sort of economic reform. You look at different countries around the world, they always, one of the big kind of reforms that they can do is try to free up foreign capital coming in. Okay. And there's different reasons for why they do that. There's massive benefits attached to FDI reform in various ways. So one of the things, of course, needless to say, but I'm just going to put it out there, is that you need capital. Right? There are certain countries which are rich in capital, others may not be as much, or at least even if there is capital, it's not freed up enough to come out as.
Well, in simple English, capital is money, right?
Capital is money. So even if there is money in a country, it might be stuck in various places, and it might not really be free enough to go into productive investments. Okay. That is, to go into factories, go into production, and thus create employment and jobs and so on. Right?
Okay.
Which is why sometimes you need foreign direct investment. That is capital or money coming in from outside into productive resources, into productive spaces.
Okay.
Right? So that is the biggest advantage of FDI.
Okay.
Does it end there? The advantage of FDI? Absolutely not.
Okay. But why is this reform? Okay, you say that, okay, we need money to do various things. But how big a deal is this?
So India has seen various stages of its interaction with the world. For a long time, I mean, even pre-independence, it was a strategic move as not to import products, and we don't need foreign money. We are self-sufficient.
Strategic or almost ideological?
Ideological. I mean, but guys under strategic.
Right.
But whatever, it served the purpose before pre-independence.
So perhaps some sort of a reaction against
colonial powers and so on, right? You want to say that we don't need Britain. I mean, we are self-sufficient and we can do well ourselves. Mm-hmm. But that was the thinking. Let's not dwell too much on that. Okay. Post-independence, it's kind of interesting. First few years, we've said that we're still a very nascent country. Our economy is not developed. I don't know how it will react to funds coming in from outside, or what a big evil corporate from the US or Britain actually that time. That was a big evil.
And let's face it, right? The East India Company is the nastiest multinational corporation in the history of the world.
Exactly, which is why we were so clear about it, right? We don't want some other company coming in and in the guise of investment and then taking over half our trade and so on, right? So which was the Nehruvian policy. We had a closed economy and so on up till the 80s, really. I mean, 91 was a big reform, but we started seeing reforms in FDI in about the late 80s.
Okay.
Rajiv Gandhi did a lot of reforms not a lot, but he did a few reforms in terms of getting capital in and cleaning up the certain sections of the economy. 91, of course, is the big deal, right? And we had a lot of reforms, but that was still largely domestic reform. Okay, we're talking about MRTP Act and all the things which were within India, which was constraining.
So that's sort of dismantling certain sections of the license.
Yes. Okay. License and permit, license and permit. Going ahead, from since 91, we've had spurts. We've had little spurts of FDI liberalization. We had them in the 90s at one point, 2000, 2004, 2000, then again in 2008, and 2012 and so on. So we've had little spurts of FDI reform, but I think we've seen some kind of sustained FDI reform now.
Okay. But tell me something. I mean, we're talking about movement of money, right? And the easy movement of money across borders.
Yes.
But money is not the only thing that moves, right? So we also we have people moving, we have other things moving. So how does this all fit in?
So I think that is one of the intangible benefits of FDI. So you have, of course, you have money coming in, which is a great deal, as we spoke about, in a capital scarce country, or where capital cannot be used very easily.
Right.
But you also have labor which gets trained in these companies. So very simply speaking, you have a big multinational corporation who comes in and it sets up a factory and it hires local labor. Right. So one is, of course, employment opportunities created.
Okay.
Job opportunities created.
Okay. Give me an example there. I mean, let's talk specifics, right? So what are you talking about? So I mean, ultimately, isn't it just money coming in?
No. So think about, okay, so go back to one of the first FDI which kind of came in, right? In 1980s, late 1980s, which we were speaking about just before this, which is TI, Texas Instruments, which came in and which set up its factories. The interesting thing that happened there was not only did it create employment, but it also trained up the people in the process.
Yeah, so 80, I mean, I remember when growing up in Bangalore in the 90s, the number one choice in any engineering college is always electronics engineering. So you're saying it's TI and the likes coming to Bangalore with sort of sense?
Absolutely. So you have a big company which is coming and it's looking to hire people. So obviously now it's created demand for trained engineers, right? In the same way that we are trying to create a demand for trained policy, which we just plug in.
True, a graduate certificate in public policy, after which the GCP big time.
Indeed.
Now that shameless plug is over.
So they wanted engineers, and then suddenly you had people who wanted this job, which meant that you had this burst of engineering colleges opened. You had people who were taking up engineering programs, and before you know it, Bangalore has become one of the hubs for higher education, right? And but that's also a cyclical thing. Now, because there's so many engineers that are produced in India, in Bangalore especially, you have more companies who are coming in here because you already have a talented pool of engineers.
And over time, that industry diversifies. And I mean, even now, Bangalore, I mean, cannot really do a great job of high-end sort of chip manufacturing. But all the design and the other things is happening, right? One of our colleagues, Pranay, used to work at Texas Instruments a while ago, for example.
So that's really how.
So you're saying that it's not just money that comes in from FDI, but also sort of technology.
So one is the labor rate, right? So people who go in there, let's say,
so it employs people.
Yeah, they spend about but it's also how they get trained. So they spend about 15 years or so, or 20 years in one of these top multinationals. They would have reached a managerial position.
Okay.
Then usually let's say they quit, they start something on their own, and now they have all the managerial practices, best managerial practices of the world.
Okay. And they then know how and
which they will then spread across to their own companies in their own company and so on. So that has a lot of benefits. Which the other bit is, of course, technological dispersion, right? So you have big company, let's say, especially a technological company coming in. People also learn about these technologies. You can't patent it within your own employee system. Which means they can also take it out, start their own company, use it, and so on.
So this is one of the things, reasons why I think there was a while back that people were very scared that, you had all these software companies which were sort of outsourcing to India. And then that now that prices are rising in India, they move to Philippines or Vietnam or some of Bangladesh or someplace else. And probably the really low-end BPO sector, some of it was sheer cost arbitrage. Anyone who can speak English sort of move. Right? But I would like to think that at least the way we are looking at Bangalore today, that the software industry is not struggling that way. Right? No, not like it's all just left Bangalore and gone outside India.
Not at all. So I think, which is a natural process in the economic cycle, right? You first have low-end technologies coming in. So basically, if you're talking about value add, initial set of FDI that came in was really low value add. We didn't contribute much to the whole thing. We were not getting trained, or there's no big technological transfer that happened. But as this goes on, once you start creating an ecosystem there for the bigger companies to come in, they start investing in factories, they start investing in higher end manufacturing process, right? And the process gets transferred to the local companies, right? You have people who want to emulate this, you have people who will borrow the technology and start their own businesses.
Okay.
Don't forget, the other thing that happens when a big FDI company comes in is that they also create a regulatory space ecosystem there.
Okay.
So once they're in, it's something new. They come in, they set up, and they basically
Like whom?
let's say even Uber came in and or let's say Amazon is trying to come in.
Okay.
Once they come in and they've set up,
So they'll come in with then a business model.
yeah, they've come with a business model which can be copied,
Okay.
but they've also kind of um, gone through or waded through the government regulatory structure, which now sets up space for others to come into that space.
Right.
Right?
Although
So
I think we're still seeing that process with Uber.
we're still seeing, yeah, we're still seeing.
So okay, so you're essentially saying that if they've come in with the technology, so Uber is an American company.
Yeah.
But you have an Indian competitor, Ola. So isn't Ola sufficient as an answer?
No, but Ola gets a lot of funding from foreign funding.
So they could be an Indian company, but they can still get foreign money.
Absolutely. So you have Ola or you even have Flipkart, and we know that Flipkart has, I mean, it's runs through venture capitalist money, but that is still FDI in a way, right?
Okay.
It's just not. I mean, don't think of FDI as just one company coming and setting up a physical factory. But
So that's the thing, right? I think in our popular imagination, and maybe we'll dwell into it a little more. This idea of Lockheed Martin will come and set up shop in India.
not necessarily.
Right? So the money can come, it can be Desis to sort of run that show.
Absolutely. So I can start a factory here, and then I can get funding from a foreign company, and that would still be considered as FDI. I mean, not my way, but the foreign funding is FDI because it's into a productive long-term asset building productivity. I mean, whatever activity.
So fair enough. So, but do you feel like the successes have largely been in the software type of a space? Like all the examples that we discussed, right? The ones that are successful. We've seen Microsoft coming into India, Oracle, all these big enterprise software companies. We have Uber and Ola, Flipkart and Amazon, and all these technology companies and tech-enabled services companies. But does it really? So therefore, is FDI sort of beholden to? I mean, does example only work in such kind of sectors?
No, absolutely not. I mean, so FDI is important across all sectors.
Right.
And you can look at, let's say, pharmaceuticals, one of the things that was freed up, and we'll get into the details much later on. But pharma is a very important space where if you allow FDI, it has huge benefits because you have a foreign company, big company, which has already produced a lot of life-saving drugs. And it can set shop in India and start selling. So again, it need not necessarily entirely own a business, it can merge with someone else and so on. Then you can think of a lot of other sectors, insurance and banking, something else that's been, that's slightly more contentious point, but still that's where you can have FDI.
All right. So cool. So we'll sort of pause with this line here. And so tell me what's happened this week, right? So we've had this announcement coming out from the government of India. I think the timing of the announcement and why it's been done now has been discussed to death. So it is frankly not something we should waste our time on.
Let's leave that to your drawing room gossip.
No, but I mean, even if that has some real implications, right? But so the idea is, so is this just a fig leaf to sort of manage controversy, or is this something legit?
No, absolutely not. I mean, FDI was always there. I mean, this plan was always there. You can't drop a big FDI policy like this in the last 2 days just after you hear dropping the pipe bomb, whatever. Okay. Right? So this is always in the plans. It might have been announced now anyway. We don't really get much about it. All said and done. I mean, regardless of any other controversy, this is a good move. You needed FDI. So forget about everything else. This was required and this was done. Actually, if it was accelerated due to this, well, good. If it was supposed to be done, 3 months later, but it's done now, well, why not?
Fair enough. So, but tell me, so this like a big bang thing that's happened now. How do I read what's happened in the FDI reforms that were announced?
So it was really, I mean, my personal view on this is an economics viewpoint, which means it's opinion. A macroeconomics viewpoint, especially.
All voodoo anyway.
That's what you always say. So I always believe in a gradual reform, or incremental rather, not gradual because that gives a negative connotation, but I mean incrementally. Not sure if we can really have big bang reforms, especially given the political economy and so on. So what Modi government has been doing is it's always been keen on FDI. Especially, I mean, since it's come to power 2014, I think that that's one thing that they've said that we're going to do it, and they've been following up on it in various degrees. So you had one big set of reforms come in November of 2014, 15, sorry, just last year, which freed up a lot of sectors. So that was about 15 sectors, I think. that they freed up FDI in various sectors.
And you think that's sort of, at least in part, linked to why we had, I think, some of the largest inflows of FDI?
2015, India was the top destination of FDI. There was about $63 billion which was promised.
Oh, so it's not just that it was the highest for India in
It
any
was
year.
highest in the world. India was the top FDI destination in the world, and that was exactly the headline statement made by Modi as well, that this new set of reforms that he's done will make India the top destination for FDI in the coming couple of years.
So you're saying that with these reforms, we will have that tag
Yes.
for whatever that tag is worth.
We might have the tag. I mean, I don't want to get into predictions, but in all probability, we might have that because overall economic conditions seem to be okay.
Okay.
And these are good reforms.
So basically, what happened today is not one-off, but
it's
a continuation of what's happened before.
Yes, it's been an incremental thing. We had one set in 2015, and other smaller things that they've been doing, and this is the second big set that's come out.
So okay,
What's
then
happened?
give me some of those specifics. What's
Sure. So what they've done essentially is they've raised the limits of foreign direct investment into various sectors.
Okay.
So this time there's been 9 sectors that's been targeted, and they've raised the limits, and some it's been up to 100%, which means you can have a company which is entirely foreign owned.
Okay.
So it was there before in certain sectors, but now the number of sectors has kind of raised. So a couple of examples: aviation,
Okay.
which they have allowed now 100%
Okay.
FDI. They have given in airport. They have
Okay.
allowed 100% FDI in brownfield airport projects. Which brownfield, by the way, means an existing investment into an existing project or merger into an existing thing.
We're hoping that somebody can save the Chennai airport from the government monopoly. Maybe.
No, not Chennai. I mean, you can probably think of Hooghly or something.
Okay. So
Various things like that: food retailing, pharmaceuticals, defense, the big one which we'll focus on a bit later on.
Okay.
Broadcast carriage, retail.
Okay.
These are some of the sectors that
broadcast, you mean like
broadcast carriage, as in broadband, internet,
okay.
mobile, not this thing, but mobile, TV.
So can AT&T come and compete with Airtel now?
No, not yet.
Okay.
You still have to go through the spectrum process.
Okay.
But you can have an AT&T which probably has an internet TV kind of thing, right?
Okay, so you mean
mobile
broadband network.
Broadband network they can have.
Okay. So that's interesting. So I already, by the way, my internet connection with home is this thing called Sky BDNL.
Sky BDNL.
Okay. Right. So that's Sky, the British Sky, and BDNL, I think, is the Bharat Broadband Nigam Limited. So what was that beast? What would that beast have been?
So the only thing is that they had approved FDI before, but it was only up to 49%.
Okay.
Right.
So it was a joint venture.
It was a joint venture. It was a forced merger with a local company. Or when I say local, I mean Indian.
Okay.
Forced joint venture with an Indian company, and then they could operate that way. But now that limit has been raised. So that limit has been raised to 100%, which means now Sky need not do that partnership, and they can provide broadband entirely on their own.
Okay.
Same thing with DTH services. That's another thing that's being given 100% FDI.
Okay. So you can have more competition for Tata Sky.
Yeah. You can have the Comcast or Viacom of the big US giants in DTH service. They can have their own telecom services, which means you basically get to watch a lot more. I mean, variety of television.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if the channels change, but hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but tell me, I mean, people keep talking about this percentage business, right? So whether you do fully owned, partly owned, 50%, 25%, and so on. But what else is there? I mean, we're talking about the movement of money, right? So is it just about investment and ownership?
So one of the big things that, I mean, if you read any news piece, a lot of it would have been regarding whether it's under the automatic route, or is it an approval basis. Okay, so that's the first big thing that we got to kind of unpack or understand. Okay, right? So in the automatic route, it means that a foreign company can come set up whatever or invest in India without any approval from the government. All they have to do is write a tier so and so. I have set up a factory. This is just to purely notify you. FYI. That's about it.
So you're saying that currently, say, software companies that come to Bangalore or Hyderabad and say, hey, this is the route.
That's basically the route that they come on. So software is one of the things which had 100% FDI route.
Okay.
They basically just need to give an FYI.
Okay.
Right? And now, as I said, the broadband carriage, broadcast carriage is one of the other things. Right?
Okay.
So let's say a Comcast comes into India, it just needs to give an FYI to the finance minister. Ministry of Finance.
Okay. Okay. So that's the automatic.
That's the automatic route. The other thing to kind of remember is that now most of the sectors have the automatic route up to a certain percentage. So that's where the interplay between percentage and the route comes into play, right? So, for example, the pharmaceutical companies have into brownfield projects such as merger and acquisitions get automatic approval up to 74%.
Okay.
And then it's a case by case basis, right? Defense again is you get automatic approval up to 49%, and then beyond that you need a case by case approval from the government.
Okay.
Of course, defense we know why they're doing it. I mean, or rather, what they say. Why?
Okay. What's the government reasoning behind this? I know that when some of my colleagues at Takshashila batted for 100% FBI, no restrictions and so on.
So now you have 100% FBI, but it has to get approval by the government. And the reason that they state is whether you agree or not, or whether let's say Nitin agrees or not, is that it's a matter of national security. You can't have India's defense or the defense of the realm under a foreign company. So that's the reasoning they give. Let's not discuss the merits of it.
Okay. So you're saying that it's by and large that so the case by case means that you go and apply to the government, and then the government in its infinite wisdom says yes or no.
Yes. So
do they? If they say no, are they expected to defend themselves?
So now, yes. Earlier, you had a position where they didn't have to give any sort of reasoning to.
But they didn't even have. Did they even have to reply in a time?
Not really. There's no restrictions, but now they have to say no and also state a reason as to why they say no or yes. Right? They have to file a report basically for every case that comes.
Okay.
So on a case by case basis, they have to justify themselves whether it's a yes or no. Especially in defense, even if it's a yes, they have to defend themselves. Okay. Otherwise, they have to defend themselves if it's a no.
Okay.
So why you deny?
All right. So there is, in that sense, even though it's an approval process, there is some system built that's been brought in.
Yes.
But I would think that some form of a timeliness check would have also been.
They must have been put out. So let's also remember that this FDI policy is not really being fleshed out by the government. What you have is a bare bone press release, right? You don't have the entire policy document out in front. So a lot of it that you read or this thing is interpretation by various analysts.
Okay.
I mean,
there's no we should wait for some notifications and rules to come out.
So for the nitty-gritty, I mean, you get the big picture definitely.
Who would put these out? Would this be what, Ministry of Corporate Affairs?
I think this came out from the Ministry of Finance. I mean, you guys can really correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Ministry of Finance perhaps.
Okay, all right. So we talked about automatic versus approval. Are there any other elements to this?
So yeah, there is until now, and let's say before this set of reforms, there was a lot of ambiguity even in cases where they did allow 100% FDI.
Okay.
Right? So, for example, defense, it's not really a big change. I mean, even though you have big headlines saying 100% FDI now allowed in defense, not really. 100% FDI was allowed in defense even before, right?
You mean since November?
Since November.
Okay.
Not before as in not yet. But since November it was allowed. And the only clause that they put in was this really ambiguous thing saying 100% FDI allowed in defense as long as it gives access to state-of-the-art technology. Okay. It's a beautifully ambiguous thing which really no one understood. Okay. So people who really wanted to invest in defense, not many people have come forth because they don't understand this ruling at all.
Okay.
And now in the latest set, they have removed that ambiguity. They have removed the state-of-the-art technology business. They removed that clause altogether, which I think is a great thing because it was no one knows what the state-of-the-art technology is. Right. And we've had this before. This is not entirely a new thing. And a lot of countries around the world do this. They're saying that you can come and invest, FDI is allowed, but only if you give us access to this great technology that that you mystically.
I'm trying to think what this means, right? Because one, for example, India has been trying to buy this fourth generation fighter aircraft. We're talking about the Rafale and the F-35, the Gripen, others who sort of, not F-35, I think, the F-16, the F-14s who sort of competed for it, which is a fourth generation fighter aircraft, right? And already I think a few countries are trying to generate and develop a fifth generation fighter. So is fourth generation now state of the art?
I don't know. I mean, the same thing with whatever the Indian defense prize rifles.
Right.
I mean, is rifle state of the art, but is only a grenade launcher state of the art? Is a bazooka state of the art? I don't know. I mean, what you might have Javans actually who need pistols, but is pistol state of the art? I'm not sure. I mean, it's been around for.
Right. And even if you don't necessarily need to buy the latest model with the laser sight and something else,
you might not require it really. I mean,
okay. And by the way, I think we have the Ordnance Factory of India, which has a monopoly or a virtual monopoly over many parts of even bullet production in the country. Right? So we don't want so many private players, let alone foreign players in this space. Okay, so you have an ambiguity like state of the art. Any other such things that sort of come in the way even after it's say automatic or 100%?
Okay, so the other really strange thing is, and sorry to dash many of your hopes, is regarding retail, FDI in retail, right? Single brand retail.
Right.
So it was given approval, FDI, but there's a clause that says that you still need to have local sourcing.
Okay.
Okay. So many of and this is again been a clause that's been present throughout any kind of FDI reform, saying you can. So local sourcing is that you can have companies who invest here, but they have to use resources which are local. They have, and there's sometimes an employment clause that you have to employ so many percentage of your labor force has to be Indian, so many of your managers has to be Indian, and so on and so forth. And thankfully now most of that is not there in terms of. There was also a clause for a long time in India. I don't know why I'm getting into this, because I mean, or at least we have to feel happy that it's not there anymore. That there was also an export clause. Okay. That if you invest in India, you have to export X percentage of your production to other countries. And the reason for that is we were always in dire short of.
So even though you're making great things in India, Indians don't have access to this because we need forex.
You needed forex, so you had to export it. So a lot of that thing is gone, thankfully, but now you still have the local sources. So FDI in retail, for example, has a local sourcing clause which says that you need to have so much of your.
So you say, I don't know. Okay, so Apple or IKEA comes in, then whatever 30% of the wood or something needs to be bought locally.
Right? Okay. So what they've done this time is that.
Which, by the way, in the case of IKEA, can lead to more deforestation within India.
Within India, and so on. It's not a top-right policy. We never came to policy.
Okay.
So what they've done this time is that you have a 3-year waiver, which can be extended to 5 years. Let's whatever between 3 and 5 years waiver.
Okay.
That you don't need to do local sourcing, so you can import from abroad. But after that, you still have to. Well,
okay.
I don't know how if 3 years is enough for these companies. I mean, a big enough incentive for these companies to come set up, right? But the government is magically is assuming that these companies at the end of 3 years will be so convinced about the beautiful resources that India has to offer that it will not import anymore and it will all use local sources.
Okay.
But I mean, I'm not really convinced about this clause at all. I think this is one space for massive improvement in the latest FDI.
Right. Or I would even look at it as, I mean, if Indian sources of supply are good enough, I think they will occupy 30% or even 50% or 70% of whatever they need. Right? So
these are smart corporations. They will do anything for profit.
Okay.
Right? And this means that if they need quality products, quality resources, and if India has the quality resources to offer, they will buy from India. Why do they import? Actually, importing is more expensive. Remember that. There is still tariffs. There is still, some.
So those things are not going away.
Those are not going away.
So there are still barriers for people to import from outside.
Import from outside. So why would they willfully import from outside if it's not beneficial?
Okay.
Right. So if the resources are good enough in India, then they will use India.
So you're saying in any case this is a superfluous sort of intervention. You anyway have the customs, and so we can talk about tariff reductions and FTAs and so on, which is a separate deal sort of.
Absolutely.
Okay, interesting. So because of the state, I think the state-of-the-art stuff even applies to Apple stores, right?
Yeah.
So the whole plan of Apple trying to get refurbished stores in India is still not on.
It's still not on.
But finally, Apple can set up its own stores as opposed to outsourcing them to all kinds of other entities. And the few people who own Apple products can actually get a better quality service
and easier.
Thanks. Okay. So you've sort of made a case for why FDI is merit, why the reforms that have happened in this week have merit, and they are a genuine improvement over the previous past. But Is this necessarily a very good thing right now? Is there, I mean, do we need this in sort of 2016 in India? I mean, we seem to be doing well otherwise. I mean, can't we make a case that November set of reforms were good enough?
So, the, India has been an attractive FDI destination for quite some time.
Okay.
It's just not, I mean, a one-year thing. At least in the last couple of years, we've always received the highest FDI and FII. Okay, FII is just short-term hot money. What we call a short-term hot money.
What would that mean? If we can sort of do a brief digress into that.
Very briefly and very simplistically, people investing in Sensex and Nifty.
Okay.
Right.
And the stock markets.
Stock market, bond market, short-term
Okay.
money, right, which is very liquid. So, which means, and that is always something that is frowned upon because you can have a ton of money coming in and then suddenly it can disappear overnight at the smallest hint of trouble.
Right. So it's not like it's money that's come in, they've got land, and they've sort of had payroll. None of that.
Yeah. So the 1997 Asian financial crisis, if anyone is interested, please read up on that. Hot money came in at the smallest sign of trouble, everyone exited, and then you had a huge illiquid situation. That is a liquidity crunch. So FDI is not that, right? It is a long-term investment.
Sure.
And India has been an attractive destination for FDI.
Okay.
So one of the questions that people have asked is why did you need it? I mean, why did you need it now? I mean, did we need to do it? We already were getting good FDI. The reason for that, Pavan, I think, is that we actually desperately need it. Right? There are basically four big sources of growth for an economy.
Okay.
Right? You have government spending, you have private investment, you have private consumption, and net exports. Okay.
Okay.
Basically exports to country. So you do good on these things, you basically earn income. I mean, as putting it as simplistically as possible. Now look at the scenario in each of this, right? You had private consumption is I mean, it's always been high and it continues to be so. That's fair.
With some strength thrown in through the agricultural distress and so on.
Sometimes, yes. But it's generally high. I mean, it's a big part of our GDP.
Okay.
So that is not a worrisome factor. But other three, right, was not doing so well. Private investment has dried up completely, and there's a number of reasons why India is reeling in terms of why private investment is not coming forth. It's been lower than previously.
Right. And then we have so much bad corporate debt.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why privates are not investing.
Okay.
Sometimes they have cash flow, but they're not really investing because they have to pay off their debt. Sometimes they're sitting on piles of cash because they don't have complete confidence in the Indian economy.
And in the past years, we've seen a lot of big Indian companies sort of invest abroad rather
than India, right? And then the other thing is, of course, banks are not willing to lend because they have such huge NPAs. Biggest set of problems. I mean, this is going into the macro stuff, right? But the private investment had dried up. Government spending, well, they've done it, but there's still hard fiscal deficit targets to meet. You have the FRPMA Act, which, well, we've not really been following it, but
yeah, I mean, we're essentially paying off how much we spent extra in the past decade.
Yeah, so government can't go spending unfettered, right? It still has limits set on it.
Right.
Which exports has been doing bad. Let's never forget. Our current account deficit has come out slightly in the last quarter, or a couple of them, and that's because of the reduced oil prices. But our exports have also massively fallen. I mean, we should have had a much higher surplus in current account than what it is now. We've just managed to trim the deficit.
Right.
Okay. So that means that exports have dried up, and that's because of macroeconomic conditions. Both two things. One, our own economy, we have not been producing enough to export. Right. We have not been producing good quality and large quantity of goods to export. And well, most of the countries
we might need the FDI also.
For which we need the FDI.
Okay.
And other countries are not really in a very good position to buy from us, right?
Okay.
So a lot of slowdown happening in Europe.
So are you saying that because we're still trying to aim for this miraculous 8% growth, 9% growth, right?
And FDI was the last straw. I mean, that is something that we are now relying on.
It's a necessary condition.
We were relying on it to deliver this much sought after 8% growth.
Okay. And we'll continue to do so.
We will continue to do so. I mean, I think we have to, because unless you drastically improve investment climate in India and private investors suddenly come forward and start investing, you need FDI, you need foreign capital coming in.
So I think we are a little over time, so we should go into questions. But before that, one final thing, the question that I sort of started with. Every time we talk about economic reforms, we end up with FDI. Right? Yes, the United States wants all of these economic reforms to happen in the country, but ultimately they say increase FDI in insurance. right?
Yeah.
So is this enough? I mean, aren't we missing a lot of things?
FDI reforms are absolutely necessary, but they're not enough. So
Okay.
there's a necessary condition, but not a sufficient condition for achieving economic growth. If you don't have a good investment climate in the country, neither will you have private investors, nor will you have foreign investment coming in. I mean, if our investment climate is not really good enough for domestic investment, why should it be good enough for foreign investment? I'm not saying one is better than the other, but investment is investment. They go after return. Right?
Sure. I mean, I remember like we'd even done a trip a couple of years ago, back when FDI and retail was the first in back in the UPA 2 regime, and we'd done a thing where we sort of chased the potato back to the farm. And one of the things we realized is, look, I mean, things are slowly changing in at least states like Karnataka, but if you have the agricultural mandi, the agricultural produce, the market, right? If that yard has a monopoly over the procurement of certain types of food items, then whether you have FDI or not, they still retain that monopoly. Right? So maybe down from that monopoly, you can do FDI to do cold storage, so on. But everything sort of upstream of that market, sort of farmer to market or farm to market, you need to do other kinds of reforms to be able to even harness the benefits of something like that.
Absolutely. If you don't have good market rules set in, market functioning properly, then FDI or no FDI really won't matter too much. So you need the whole ease of doing business, right? Which is being talked about a lot, but that is still essential for people to come and invest. You need to have
ease of doing business and also regulatory climate, right? I mean, if you are having a government like Karnataka, the state of Karnataka, which is deciding that it's going to regulate Uber and Ola and others as if they were sort of taxis from the era where phones or mobile phones were just invented and smartphones didn't exist, then you're not going to have
absolutely. So I'll just give a couple of examples if you can afford me the time, and this is from to do with a recent.
Okay, actually, let's just pivot to questions.
Okay, sure.
And maybe in the questions, we can cover this. So let's see. Sorry, guys, I'm using this YouTube chat thing for the first time. Okay.
With us.
Pick a question.
Okay, so Pranay, of course, Kodastani says, are there examples of successful economies that did not allow FDI in large measure? Well, top of my hat, I don't think so.
I would say, I mean, maybe it goes back to your question, right? What are the sources of capital available? I think if you're a petro economy, where you can just underwrite your entire national budget through oil sales, maybe Saudi Arabia does not need too much foreign money coming in.
Yeah. So if any country which has a requirement for capital and it is capital scarce, then it can't do well without foreign capital. It's at that level a common sense thing.
Right.
You need to plug the gap of capital deficit somewhere, right?
Okay.
And most of the time you might have to look outside. So if you're capital rich, that's absolutely fine.
Fair enough. Mr. Muralidhar Rao asks if FDI in healthcare is okay. I don't know if our healthcare debate has advanced enough for us to have an intelligent debate on FDI, because we are still trying to figure out what is the role of the state and what is the role of the private sector, right? I think we have an underfunded, underfunctioning government healthcare system, with some people having the dream of a universalized healthcare system like that of the United Kingdom, right? Where we have genuine public health problems. It's like you're building hospitals to solve diarrhea, which should be solved by open defecation, right? So first of all, the government-private thing is sort of, we don't know what the equation should be and what's the right mix for India. On top of that, if we're talking about FDI, even if some FDI comes in, it'll be in the super specialty domain, which is meant for elite sort of things.
If you're looking at public healthcare or healthcare of the large masses and as a country as a whole, FDI debate is still a bit
right. It's like, I think maybe it's a debate we need to start at the right time. Like, I think the FDI and retail debate started a few years ago. So at least now we can talk about it, right? I mean, maybe 5 or 6 years ago it was an impossible idea, but at least now we can say, oh, FDI and single brand retail, will it come in? Won't it come in?
They start now so that 4 or 5 years later you might have FDI in healthcare. Okay. And again, when it starts off, it will be in the higher end stuff.
Anjana asks, what are the downsides of high levels of FDI? This is not hot money that can go very short. So if you have extraordinarily high levels of FDI, are there any downsides?
This is, a tricky question. My gut or instinctive answer would be no.
Okay.
Because if you require capital and capital is coming in from somewhere else, it's not really a problem. So as we previously mentioned and as she has mentioned itself, FII is different. That's hot money which can come in and go out anytime. But FDI is not so, right? It is meant for a longer term and it's there.
Maybe if I have to think about it, I mean, maybe it's the idea of a corporation wielding an immense amount of market power and government sort of regulatory power, right? Versus, so what is the relative strength of the state versus the strength of the private corporation? But even there, I think a lot of our fears are overblown because again, no single corporation in current day world is even remotely as powerful as something like the East India Company. Right? So, in the sense of what is the relative power of the individual versus the corporation versus the state, I think is a far more nuanced question than
right. Yeah.
So, if you have a hell of a lot of FDI and you have these large multinational corporations with sort of arms everywhere who have enormous concentrations of power, then
So specifically, it depends on why there's such a huge amount of FDI. So if it's because okay, so even if you have large amounts of FDI, it doesn't mean that you can just save, right? You still need a healthy savings rate in the economy.
Right.
So if large amounts of FDI is creating a situation where there's absolutely no incentive to save, that could be bad. So that's at a micro.
Or if you see large amount of FDI as a percentage, it is a symptom of other sources of investment not being there.
Precisely. So if you're talking about just huge amounts of FDI in the economy, but it's in balance with overall capital, that's not a problem. But if it's a huge percentage of total capital in the country,
then there's something else that is fishy that's in the
exactly. It could lead to other imbalances. Okay. But on its own, capital coming in is not a bad.
Okay. So we'll probably take a couple of questions before winding up. I think which question?
Okay. So just a comment, and I'll just read it out really. Pranav Gupta says getting the ordnance factories to clean up should be factor. I think this is the whole labor reforms thing, right? One of the things that we spoke about in having, creating the right and investment environment is to clear up the labor reforms. Labor laws in India.
Okay.
Because if
so this is the argument that I've had some amount of trouble with. Where I think, tell me if I'm paraphrasing this argument wrong. Okay. Currently, all reforms is about a battle between people who are winning in the current disposition and who favor a status quo, and those who may benefit from reform, right? Including sort of people who champion India trying to be better and actual winners in a process, right? So you have an oligopoly over something who are incumbents, and you have others who are trying to make ends, right? Sure. So if all reform is a contestation between the two, and the people who want change, if their hand gets bolstered, then something happens. I think the argument has been, look, all these foreign companies which will come in, foreign capital which will come in, will back for a more liberalized economy, a more reformed economy, and so therefore we will do more reforms. Okay, right? So I think there's a lot of argument saying FDI should be the first step because there'll be knockover effects. You will have more powerful drivers of the economy and economic reform. Right? Yeah. But my sort of discomfort with all of this has always been it's easy to make this a foreign versus Indian problem. Right? So it's like saying, look, India needs to improve ease of doing business, but I know that only Walmart and somebody else is asking for ease of doing business. So therefore, I'm distrusting of these foreign Walmart entities. So maybe I should not do the good reforms that should have helped me in the first place.
Yeah, you're right. But I think it's a good thing. So if you have FDI who comes in and does back for a more liberal economy, and it is genuinely good for, so there's a difference, right? So that sometimes it can back for legislation which will help only in concentration of power. No one wants that. That's sure. But if it does indeed help in liberalizing a lot more of the economy, which will help India, then sure, why not?
Only thing is if the perception changes to, this helps American companies. Never mind that they are wholly owned subsidiaries based in India, for Indian consumers, or for giving jobs for Indians and so on. Right? But if it becomes this, we are helping foreigners because of this genuine reform that helps us, then it becomes a problematic.
Definitely, it's how you manage it. So this time, I think FDI. There's not been that much of a clamor. Yes, the opposition has said its usual statement saying it will hurt the poor and so on and so forth, which you can expect the opposition
Right.
to do so.
I mean, which frankly is ridiculous. Like if you look at, say, everyone from all these new companies that have coming out, the tech-enabled ones, from the localized delivery services to the likes of Flipkart to the cab aggregators, they're providing employment to people who are doing delivery, people who are driving, people who are doing logistics, right? I mean, the number of
they're creating income,
right? I would argue that a certain amount of agricultural distress may be actually relieved because you have young people who are coming in from villages and from small towns and so on.
Who don't mind being an Uber driver or even working as a delivery boy or Flipkart or
and then sending some money home, and then whereas the alternative was we don't know how much they would be earning and how much they would be getting work. So I think so. Thank you very much. I think we're more or less at the end of our show. I think I actually have a comment from Pranay here, I think, which is a great note to end this on. I think Pranay captured something that we did not touch upon today, which is that I think one great FDI reform would be moving from what is a positive list right now, an identified list of things that people can invest in and limits and so on, to something like a negative list, where it says that you can do whatever you want in all of these things except for these 5 things that I picked, where I might continue to put some kind of control, right?
Put everything under the automatic route. Pick out the things that you don't want under it. So it's
because this to me is, I think, important because some of my pet areas that I care a lot about, we don't even have conversations around FDI, right? Do we have FDI in weather-related services? No. I mean, I would love weather.com and others to come and operate and set up infrastructure in India. Right now, you have AccuWeather and a few others who are sort of making an app and showing you something, but I have no idea what data they have because I know that apart from the Indian Meteorological Department and a few sporadic initiatives, you don't have infrastructure that is even gathering information on the weather, right? Or something like FDI in the space sector, where ISRO does have continue to enjoy a virtual monopoly, an actual monopoly over all space-based services out of the country, right? So there are, I think, a lot of small sectors where public conversation and debate don't even go, so you don't even have contestation of the status quo. And I think that's a great note to end the call. So thank you, Anupam. Thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you again next week. Last week, we had the programming on how, I think, liberals, select liberals, including the likes of, I think, Gokhale, Ranade, and others, sort of shaped India's polity. These are people from the 19th century and the early 20th century. So before that, I think we've talked about everything from should Delhi, the national capital territory, be an independent state, a full-fledged state, to the idea of how should India talk about climate change and many other topics.
Yeah, and it can be a bit shameless. We spoke about how Brexit impacts Indians way before anyone else starts speaking about Brexit.
Yeah, so now that the vote's on, let's see whether things will really benefit India or not. Right? So tune in again. We'll be doing this next week, either on Wednesday or on Thursday at 8 p.m. And if you want to sort of stay up to date with this and sort of drop one of us an email or send us your email on Twitter or on Facebook, we'll sort of add you to a mailing list so that you don't miss this next week. Okay. Thank you so much and have a good evening.
Thanks.